for around the election observers. And I mean, we have to be able to interrogate this issue around observers, who gives them their mandate, but most importantly, are they trained to look for what they will be looking for, right? How do they know what to look for? Do they have the eye for it? Do they receive adequate training? Or is this all voluntary at this point? In which case it will be, what is the relevance then of election observers? As the day progresses, we hopefully will be answering some of those questions and more. Mfundo, it is a very busy time, as you can see here at the National Results Operations Center in Tshwane. Never a dull moment, but it is back to you in studio.
No, thank you very much, Faith. Never a dull moment indeed, but certainly worth a conversation as well, that are they adequately trained? I know the IEC is adamant that they are trained, but sometimes we have situations where in such an environment, people suddenly flout all procedures that they know they're supposed to adhere to. But nevertheless, to this now, election results continue trickling in. Over 30% of the total votes have been counted so far, and the ANC is in the lead nationally. For more analysis, we have political analyst Mapaseka Muroa, who joins us live in studio. Mapaseka, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Mfundo.
No, it's a pleasure. Now, perhaps to start with voter turnout. This seems to be a very topical issue where many people are saying, you know, ordinarily in a democracy, we expect that elections should be a reflection of the majority. But in this instance, it's a reflection of the minority. But another thing that we're seeing is that the IEC was quick to say that, no, don't be asking us about numbers now. Earlier they said it's too early to tell. But now they're saying, listen, some of the factors that lead to poor turnout are beyond the purview of the IEC. If there's a trust deficit, it has nothing to do with us. It's political institutions. Do you think it's fair to apportion blame or be quizzing them so much on voter turnout, or we also need to speak to government about this?
I think we definitely need to speak to government. The wider issue here is that voters feel despondent. And generally, we know that the local elections have a lower turnout than the national elections. But what's particularly clear is that, and I've said this before, the past 12 years, there's been a shift in South Africa where people are feeling particularly despondent. I mean, we saw with the quote-unquote xenophobic attacks, the recent lootings that we saw. And what's happening is that people would rather take to the streets than actually vote. But what people don't seem to understand is that taking part in the electoral process, it's not necessarily saying it's a vote of confidence for the governing party. You can actually use that opportunity to punish them in the polls, to vote for someone else. So what should be particularly worrying for the governing party is that if people are not taken to the polls, then it's possible that an insurgency might be looming.
And, you know, it was worrying because I listened to Fikile Mbalula just a bit earlier. One journalist had asked him that, what does he think of the voter turnout? And he said, you know what, we can't worry about that now, but it looks like we might have an opportunity to govern. So it seems like here we've got politicians that are worried about the numbers, even if they reflect the will of the minority. So it seems there's no concern for that. We just want to win. Is that the correct mentality if you're saying that there's a looming insurgency?
Look, it's not. But for them, that is the point. The point is for them to govern. But I think they do need to think about not just their constituency, but South Africa as a whole and what's currently going on in the country. We can attribute the despondency to them particularly, right? The past 27 years and the incompetence, the corruption, particularly at the local government. The state of municipalities is incredibly shocking. The lack of just functionality that's missing there, that's an issue.
And the know-how, because some say that some of these officials are not really qualified. They don't have the manual of how to run these municipalities. If you're having a situation where you'd listen to one official say, you know what, we actually do deliver sanitation. There are toilets, but do you know why they keep popping up where we have pit toilet situations? It's because of rapid urbanization. They always use that, but there's no planning then on your part. If you're going to say you have a lot of people flocking to the cities, why, and then services follow them, is it really enough to talk of rapid urbanization when we have other world cities that know how to handle such a situation?
Exactly. And that's been one of the conversations at the fore, is that all these political parties, particularly the ones that are governing, have been saying, look, the aging infrastructure in the metros are as a result of people moving to the metros. That then says there is no economic development outside of the metros.
Correct.
And then you have the African National Congress saying, well, you know what, actually, we want to ensure that the metros are the hub of economic development, but not speaking to what we should do in terms of developing outside of the metros. So it's a missed opportunity in that regard. And I hope that government takes it to a second look and decides to actually do something about it. But the leadership and the responsibility is clearly lacking.
And just in closing, there was one observation that Patricia de Lille made, which is that we saw the urban white voters actually go out in numbers. What does that really say? Because if many of us are dissatisfied with what's happening, good and well, but you had the urban white voters going to the polls yesterday. And then those that are living in abject poverty are the ones one would assume would want to see the change, but they decided to stay away.
Yes, they want to see the change, but they don't believe in the electoral system anymore. And we see with the Freedom Front Plus taking a big bump and growing. So South Africans need to rethink.
Which is scary.
They need to rethink how to approach this. Are you going to go to the streets and have a consistent plan on how to have a way forward? Or are you going to the polls and ensure that you remove the party that you've got complaints with? So
clearly a lot of education that still needs to be sort of taken to the ground, and people understanding that perhaps your best expression is to vote. But thank you very much for joining us this